Welcome back, Warfiends. Today, on Warhammer Math, we're going to be comparing some Imperial Guard tank options and figuring out which Tau commander you should be most afraidest of. A few weeks ago, we simulated your requests from the comments. They were fantastic, but there were way too many to fit into one episode. So, we decided to do a couple more. But before we get started, I just want to bring the newcomers up to speed. I have written a custom program that takes an attacking unit and a defending unit and then simulates the attack between them a million times so that we can see the entire distribution of results. Let's get started. All right, let's get to that first comment. Queasy wants to know, for a future video, I found camping my deployment zone with a Russ Vanquisher, as long as I maintain long line of sight, gave me very good return on its points cost. Everyone's lauding the Demolisher as far as anti-tank work goes, so I was curious what the maths would show on this one. Yeah, so the Leman Russ Demolisher versus the Leman Russ Vanquisher. So essentially the tanks have identical profiles, they can take mostly identical loadouts, but the Demolisher tank has the Demolisher battle cannon, which has 24-inch range, D6 plus 3 attacks, hitting on 4s, strength 14, AP 3, and damage D6.
I'm familiar with that profile with my Chaos
D6
Vindicator.
plus 3 attacks. How many attacks do you get with yours?
Oh, I think D6 plus 3.
Dang.
But I think mine's hitting naturally on on 3s instead of 4s.
That's helpful.
That's a big difference. So all the Imperial Guard tanks mostly just hit on 4s?
I think it's common because they frequently get the +1 to hit from orders and whatnot. That's my understanding.
Oh, that makes sense. So these are both Leman Russes, but they're just different data sheets determined just because they have a different main cannon.
Different main cannon. And of course, they've got different abilities here too. So the Demolisher has the Line Breaker ability, which essentially allows it to shoot at things in close combat, even though it has blast. And it does not suffer a penalty to its hit roll. So don't all vehicles shoot while in close combat? Not if they have blast. It has to be a non-blast weapon usually.
Oh, so it can shoot blast weapons
at whatever is fighting it. Yeah.
Oh, at what is fighting it. Yeah. So it can, when it is in close combat, it can shoot at the unit that is fighting it.
Exactly.
Because normally you can't shoot at what you're fighting, right?
You can, as long as it's not a blast weapon.
Okay.
So this is essentially a special exception for, yes, this has blast, but it still gets to shoot.
That seems pretty useful for a tank that is very obviously going to have to be way up in the opponent's face.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
So the Vanquisher, by comparison, has one gun, 72 inches, one attack hitting on 4s, strength 18, AP 4, and damage D6 plus 6.
Ooh, that is a mean stat line.
Yeah.
Strength 18 seems a little bit excessive. It seems like it doesn't need to go.
And then on top of that, it's got Tank Killer. So each time this model makes a ranged attack with its Vanquisher battle cannon that targets a monster or a vehicle, it gets to re-roll its wound roll. Ooh. So the wound roll is pretty consistent. Hitting on that 4 is pretty rough, though. I mean, even with the orders hitting on 3, that seems even more swingy than this casino cannon over here. That's all I'm saying.
All relying on just one shot gives me anxiety.
Just one shot. Something to notice, though, I'm going to go ahead and assume that they both get +1 to hit, either from heavy or from orders or something like that. If yours hit on 4 still, just subtract 25% from my damage output, and that should give you your damage output.
Well, it's worth pointing out the Demolisher cannon is not heavy, so the Leman Russ Vanquisher could stay in the back, and if it doesn't move, it can hit on 3s anyway.
True.
But the Demolisher can't do that.
True. Yeah, I am still assuming orders, though, because I see them thrown out quite frequently. So I'm assuming you got access to that. Again, if that's not you, just subtract 25% from my results. That gives you your results. Before we move on, I just want to remind y'all, comment for the comment gods!
Like for the like throne!
All right, back to it.
Corn cares not from whence the likes flow.
All right. The other thing that I really want to mention is that at first it really looks to me like the Demolisher cannon is just flat out better because you're going to get an average of, 6.5 shots?
Right.
But the Vanquisher tank, or the Vanquisher cannon, first of all, it gets to reroll its wounds with a higher AP and higher strength. But its damage output for a single success is D6 plus 6 as opposed to D6. So D6 gives you an average of 3.5. D6 plus 6 gives you 3.5 plus 6, or 9.5.
At first glance, you'd look at those and you'd be like, well, that looks like twice as much damage. It's actually closer to 300% as much damage.
271% as much damage on average on a success.
That is such a mean gun.
Yeah.
But man, it's scary to have to rely on one shot.
Yeah, but we do love those casino cannons. That is so much fun.
They sure make for fun graphs.
They make for fun graphs. They also make for fun games. I don't know if I would always take that to a tournament, but for casual, absolutely. Let's bring in some swingy stuff.
Yeah, you can't rely on it. If you can't rely on a thing to definitely happen, it's hard to then build plans for what should subsequently happen, because who knows? That's my thought.
That said, I do have something to say on that, which is if I had a Vanquisher tank, I would be budgeting a command point for a potential reroll, because that reroll on the hit is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because if you're hitting on 3s, then if you budget that reroll, there's only a 1 in 3 chance you're going to have to use it. So if you're shooting all 6 turns of the game, all 5 turns of the game, you're still using less than 2 command points on average for this. And it brings your probability of getting to that save roll from a 59% to a 79%.
That's a big bump. That's your that's almost your threshold. For you, 80% is your count on it.
Yeah, but we also have to worry about saves, though. Because, like, most things that are saving on 3s won't get a save unless they're in cover, or they have Armor of Contempt, or if there's an invuln. So,
every single gate in this sequence is a really significant one.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you got a 79% chance to get through to the save. If they don't have a save, that's almost an 80% chance of success. That feels really freaking good. But
good point. Yeah, 79%.
Most of the time, they're probably going to be saving on 6s or possibly 5s, or if there's invulns, 4.
The invulns are going to make a real big difference against a thing like that.
Down to like 40% success. That's scary.
Yeah.
So, the question was, is the Vanquisher a valid option? Like, could we go that way? So let's go ahead and throw it into a couple of armored targets and see how they stack up.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. All right.
All right. So first, let's go ahead and go into like a nice standard medium-ish tank. Of course, my standard is going to be a Gladiator Lancer, because those are everywhere these days. Gladiator Lancer has toughness 10, 3-up save, and 12 wounds.
And is there an invul?
There is no invul, crucially. So against a AP4, not going to get a save at all.
So this is kind of the perfect target for it almost.
Kind of. Yeah. So we're going to see, though, this is interesting. The Demolisher tank does, on average, I did actually forget to explain something crucially. It was on the slide, but I didn't mention it.
Whoa.
These two tanks have identical loadouts, except that when it comes to the option of the extra weapons, I figured for the Demolisher, if you're trying to kill tanks and you're right up close, you're going to take multi-meltas.
Yeah.
But if you've got a long-range tank like this, multi-meltas aren't going to help you because they're only shooting 18 inches.
Right.
So I decided to load that guy out with heavy bolters.
Okay.
So essentially, they both have their main battle cannon, a laze cannon. The Demolisher gets 2 multi-meltas. The Vanquisher gets 2 heavy bolters.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because there's no reason you're going to put multi-meltas in your backfield.
Right.
And if you're up close, you're not going to waste that spot on something weak like a bolter. That makes sense to me.
I mean, I will be honest, if I was using this, I would probably try and send the bolters elsewhere if I could, because they're not really anti-tank weapons. But
right.
You know, for a better comparison, I just shot everything at the tank that they're shooting at in question.
Right.
So, back to that Gladiator. I'd like to mention that the Demolisher is going to get 10.7 damage through, and the Vanquisher is going to get 7.9 damage through.
Okay, so there's a little win for the Demolisher.
Yeah, like, what is that, like a 25-ish% increase in damage? Interesting to note, though, the Demolisher cannon itself does 6.7 damage here, 6.3 damage here. So most of the difference is actually in the additional armaments, because the multi-melta gives you 2.6 damage here, and the heavy bolters are only going to get you 1/4 of a damage here.
Oh, really? So the main cannon did approximately the same?
I mean, the Demolisher is still better, but not by a gigantic margin.
Well, those graphs look friggin' wacky, though. They're telling a whole different story.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Demolisher tank has a nice, smooth curve because you've got a lot of shots coming
Except
through.
for that spike at 6.
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure I could explain that. That probably is just a combination of if you get a bunch of die 6 stuff going through. But yeah, why there's a spike here exactly, I think I'd have to look at that in a lot more detail.
Well,
but,
with a million simulations, it seems like it's statistically significant.
Yeah, there is a reason for that. This could be explained away. But it's because of the combination of D6 damages and stuff. It just happens to be the most probable. Also notice, almost a 4% chance to bounce. Not bad, 4%, 1 in 25. But the Vanquisher tank, on the other hand, got a really weird graph. You're going to notice this like big old plateau looking thing over here. That's the Vanquisher cannon. That's what you get if you get D6 plus 6 damage through. That's all of that stuff.
That's the plateau of plus 6.
Yes, the plateau of plus 6. You're going to notice that the Vanquisher cannon, on the other hand, has almost an 18% chance to completely bounce. That's hard.
And that hurts.
Mm-hmm. And the spreads are very interesting because the Demolisher will do 6 to 15. The Vanquisher will do 2 to 12, although this 2 is a little weird because it's skewed over here so far by all these zeros.
Yes, 2 itself is an extremely unlikely number, but it still ends up being the interquartile. Now, remind me, is this with a command point reroll?
This is with a command point reroll, which you will end up using 1/3 of the time. But I assume that you would only use that command point on the Vanquisher cannon itself, that you probably wouldn't use it on bolters or the laser cannon.
Yeah, definitely don't.
I mean, you might use it for the wound on the laser cannon if you're feeling spicy. But, I mean, it really depends. I never have enough command points going around, so I would definitely budget for the Vanquisher cannon. I probably would feel reluctant to spend it anywhere else.
It seems like that would be like the most valuable command point you could friggin' spend is a reroll to hit with your Vanquisher cannon.
Yeah.
Because that, dude, you could one-shot a Gladiator Lancer there. A 26% chance. I mean, you're not counting on it.
Right.
But you could.
Yeah, just take it right out, even without any support.
Oh my God. Talk about a demoralizing friggin' maneuver.
So we definitely see that the Demolisher has a better chance to take it out in one go. But the Vanquisher is not actually that far away if you're considering multi-turn damage.
Wow. That sort of makes me feel like it's not as low. You can count on it a little more than I expected. Yeah. Also, you're doing it from the backfield, which is kind of nice. Yeah, like, it's nice to not stress about...
Probably not going to get charged. Get to pressure your opponent the whole time. They're like, great, there's a big old gun. I don't want to put anything out here.
And the intimidation factor on that friggin' schnoz. Look at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is, that's the thing that'll stress you out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Compensating for something? Okay. So let's go ahead and throw this into a harder target, see how it does now.
Okay, we're going to upgrade to like a Land Raider or something?
Yeah, something like a Land Raider, but in honor of Joe, we're going to go into a Land Fortress.
Yay!
Same
Kill the
profile.
dwarves.
Doesn't make a difference, but...
The filthy Xenos.
All right, so against the Land Fortress, the Demolisher does between 4 and 11 with a median of 7. The Vanquisher does between 0 and 10 with a median of 7. Same median value, but the means are not the same.
With that little plateau of plus 6.
Yeah, with the plateau of plus 6. Exactly. So the Demolisher's doing, 7.9 damage on average versus the Vanquisher, 5.9 damage. So we're definitely seeing a difference here. Again, look at the main battle cannon.
Wow, basically
5.06, 5.01.
Wow.
Practically the same. The difference here is actually coming from the multi-meltas because the heavy bolters just aren't doing very much.
Yeah, they're not.
I don't know why that is blue, but that's okay.
Wait, can we go back one slide for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we went from 10-6 and 7-8 to, go forward now, 7-8 and 5-8. Okay. The Vanquisher seems to have cared less about the difference.
Well, what's the difference going to be? It won't be wounding on as high as a roll because it's now toughness 12, so it's going to be wounding on 3s, but re-rollable. And it has an extra pip of AP. So the Vanquisher is going to be saving on a 6, and versus the Demolisher, it's not going to be saving. Whoops.
Reverse.
Nope, that's backwards.
Reverse.
Nope. With the Vanquisher, it's going to be saving on 6, and the Demolisher is going to be saving on a 5.
Got it.
So bigger decrease in damage there as a matter of percent.
And a 2% chance of taking it out in one shot.
Right, and the Demolisher's got a 9.9% chance of taking it out in one shot.
The other thing that feels like it's different is like you can imagine that the Demolisher, its presence next turn you almost can't count on it because it's the bowling ball that you're kind of making a mess with out front. Meanwhile, the Vanquisher cannon, you're pretty sure you're going to get another shot next turn.
Well, the other thing, though, is that, like, your opponent knows where it is, so it's also going to be a little bit easier to avoid. Whereas if you got something up close, that maneuverability is going to make a difference because you're more likely to be able to get angle on whatever it is that you're trying to attack.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that. It might be a little easier to just get clear of the line of sight of the Vanquisher.
Well, I know as an Eldar player, if I see a Vanquisher tank on the other side, I'm just not putting anything where it can be seen by the Vanquisher.
You would never, you're like, all right, no problem.
Absolutely smushed. All my vehicles are toughness 9 or lower.
Let me just make my Falcon go die 6 plus 3 extra inches and not count as advancing. You're such a butthead. Friggin' Eldar. They just,
You're welcome. Okay. But cool. Obviously, I mentioned that it's going to make a difference because of that awesome save roll. I'm sorry, that awesome AP roll. And the save is going to make a difference. So I figured we needed to throw it into something that has an invulnerable save. And I thought, who better than our old pal Mortarion?
Oh, yes. Morty. Let's shoot Morty with the Vanquisher.
So we already know that they can't kill land fortresses or land raiders in one go, so probably not into Mortarion either. But they're going to take a decent amount of damage from it, right?
Yeah, they'll take a chunk out of them.
Yeah, okay. So,
well, I would have thought that, but now your furrowed brow.
The Demolisher can do between 2 and 7 with a median of 4, whereas the Vanquisher does between 0 and 6 with a median of 1.
Oh my God.
Rough. I'm not sure exactly what this percentage is. Oh, yes, I do. 46% chance to bounce completely.
Wow.
Whereas the Demolisher only has 13.5% chance to bounce. So at least you think that the Demolisher can probably strip off some wounds. The Vanquisher either is going to do some decent damage or it's not. There's no chipping away with Mortarion with the Vanquisher.
Okay, and a 0.032% chance of killing him.
Mm-hmm. And again, we're going to notice the damage in the main cannon does make a difference here. 3.4 versus 2.5.
Okay, and the multi-melt is 1.
Multi-melts are
the heavy bolters did 0.09 damage.
Anything.
Honestly, I feel like you can just imagine, for the sake of this, that, like you said, the bolters are not shooting at the main cannons.
Bolters are probably going somewhere else.
They have very different preferred targets.
All right, let's take a look at some takeaways. So, first of all, your odds of getting that Vanquisher shot through is better than 50-50 if your opponent doesn't have an invul and you're willing to spend that budget a CP for the hit reroll.
Right.
So,
which
better
again
than 50-50
seems like
most
a good
of the time.
plan.
Yeah, again, scary, but half the time. If it's safe, that might be great because you might be able to pull that off 2 or 3 times a game. 2 or 3 times a game. Also, you only need to get an extra turn or possibly 2 to get the equivalent damage through. So it might be a plausible strategy depending on things, depending on everything, because that's how this game goes. But it wasn't really that far behind the Demolisher, and I know from experience that if ever you have a Demolisher, I make that my prime target and make sure that that is taken care of as soon as possible. I might not get the same opportunity against the Vanquisher. It seems very reasonable that the Vanquisher might stick around for 1 or possibly 2 extra turns. And if it sticks around for 2 extra turns, it's definitely going to be getting its points worth. Swingier, but definitely getting its points worth.
Yeah, and then also, though, because again, there's sort of unrealized potential in those heavy bolters that didn't feel represented here, which gives it, I feel like it just gets a little bit of a bump to its grade as a result of that. And I guess it really feels...
You can do a little bit more stuff.
Yeah. It feels like if you're trying to get a bowling ball to smash some, just make an annoying thing in the front. They both seem pretty valid, though.
Yeah. So it does not reliably do damage when you need it, which in my opinion is the biggest detractor here. I think that the biggest liability is when you're coming up with multiple resources, if you're trying to commit a bunch of things to try and take something down, because it's mostly a contributor. It's mostly not one-shotting things. So that means you're lining up multiple things, you're putting multiple things in harm's way, and if you can't rely on one of them, that is very scary. because it means that not only might you not kill your thing, but you're also likely to have other targets out in the open that you might have preferred were not there to get shot at. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I think it depends on your meta. I think it depends on how you're using it. I think this is, when going into this, I was like, well, that's hilarious. I'll just go ahead and run this just to find out. I was like, okay, this does actually seem like a valid option, though.
Yeah, I buy it. I buy it. And again, that intimidation factor. You can really screw with someone psychologically.
I think at some point we got to do a video just like straight on Imperial Guard tanks, because these were pretty mean and pretty awesome. I want to know what happens if there's a bunch of tanks on the field.
I've never played against Imperial Guard. I want to play against Tanya's Imperial Guard.
So bad.
Tanya,
Tanya,
War
can
Mistress.
we play Warhammer with you? We want to fight your Imperial Guard.
Oh, I also want to face her orcs. Her orcs have won like all sorts of awards for best in show. Like, they're just beautiful.
What a badass.
What a badass. Tanya, the War Mistress.
All right. Next up, I've gotten a lot of requests about Tau. Also, our buddy Mike just started a Tau army, and so we're trying to give him every incentive to want to play with us and
Filthy
every
fishies.
bit of extra help, because wow, getting into this hobby can feel like a lot when you're new to it. There's so much to learn. Also, if you've been enjoying my Space Marine blue pin, you should support the channel by buying one of these. Yeah. All right, moving on.
Really help out the channel.
Really helped out the channel. All right, so our other comment today comes from Despotic Walnut, which is a tag I freaking love. Nicely done.
What a nut.
And they would like to know, with Retaliation Cadre getting their AP buff in 9 inches now, running Flamer Starscythes is looking even more enticing. I would love to see some math on a Flamer Crisis Squad with a commander, probably running 1 Cyclic Ion Blaster and 3 Flamers versus a squad with Farsight, who has that sweet +1 to wound rolls within 9 inches and potentially free Overwatch.
So, Starscythes are crisis suits?
Yeah, Starscythes are crisis suits. They split them into multiple profiles now, so these are the Flamer boys.
The flamey suits.
Yeah, the Flamey suits.
Flame on.
So here's what we got with these battle suits. Movement 10, toughness 5, 3 up save, 4 wounds apiece, OC 2. Critically, they get a burst cannon and a Tau Flamer, but they're allowed to double up on one of them if they want. So we're just going to go ahead and give all our battle suits 2 Flamers.
That seems appropriate.
And these Flamers are Ignore Cover, Torrent, range 12 inches, die 6 attacks, strength 4, 0 AP, 1 damage.
So like a standard Flamer.
Yeah. Also, crucially, with this squad, they've got Starscythe ability. Each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack, excluding attacks against monsters and vehicles, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. They are also allowed to shoot in a turn in which they fall back, which is super important. So it's going to be hard to like pin them down just by tagging them with nuisance charges.
Okay, so they get extra AP when shooting a vehicle or monster.
No, when not shooting a vehicle or monster.
Okay, I was like, the Tau, that'd be the worst ability for a bunch of Flamers.
Now, what we're going to pair this with is the detachment rule for Retaliation Chondra, which says each time a Tau battlesuit model from your army makes a ranged attack that targets a unit within 12 inches, improve the strength characteristic of that attack by 1. If the attacking target, if that attacks a target. If that attack targets a unit within 9 inches, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1 as well. Which means, if you are attacking within 9 inches, all of these Flamers become Strength 5 AP 2 damage 1.
Holy crap. That will shred some Marines.
Yeah, and your 3 battle suits, they can only be taken in 3s now, which I found confusing because I know you used to be able to take them in 9s if you wanted to.
9s?
It was a stupid points investment, but it could be done.
Oh my God. Okay, they're maxed out 3. So you're talking 2 Flamers apiece?
Yeah, 2 Flamers apiece.
So 6 Flamers.
Also, I might need your help here. One of the reasons that we did this was because one of our friends, Mike, is starting a Tau army, and we wanted to kind of see what he could do and also see if we can offer some advice. Each one of these battle suits can take 2 drones, and they're not allowed to double up. They get an option between a gun drone for some extra shooting, a marker drone so they can marker light stuff, and a shield drone which gives them an extra wound.
But anything can marker something, right?
Yes, but if you have the marker-like keyword, then it also gets to ignore cover, whatever you're guiding for.
Okay, so as long as you have just one marker drone, you're better at marking for other units. But if you're using this big hammer of a unit, probably things are going to mark for them instead.
Yeah, so, I mean, the way I looked at it, again, I could really use your advice on this. I figured you'd just give every single battlesuit a gun drone, and then you'd take at least 2 shield drones, and then maybe a marker drone. But I could really use your help on this because I see all the drones for Tau, and I'm never really sure what is the best option. I mean, yeah, we could do a deep dive, but that wasn't really the point here. So if y'all have some advice, because y'all have practical experience with this, we all over here at Warhammer Math would really appreciate that.
Yeah, Mike at this point in time has only played with Fire Warriors, Devilfish, and Commander because we're doing all combat
we've been doing
patrol.
all combat patrol, but he's branching out.
Yeah, he needs some crisis suits.
Yeah, okay, so the question is, we're taking this unit, but there are 2 different commander options that we need to sort of measure up against each other. So let's take a look at those 2 commander options. The first one is a commander in Coldstar battlesuit.
That seems appropriate.
Yeah, I got a little confused before because I guess there are a couple of different commander options, but this seems to be the one to go with for this squad because of the potential for all the additional flamers. This guy gets 3 flamers, a cyclic ion blaster, and has this special rule. While a model is leading this unit, models in that unit have a move characteristic of 12, and their ranged weapons now have assault.
What was their move characteristic before?
10.
Okay.
So essentially, instead of moving 10 inches and flaming stuff, they can now move an average of 15.5 inches and flame stuff.
Which is critical for that within 9 inches, an extra AP.
Absolutely. So that's like an extra 50% to their threat range there.
Wow.
Well, that's not true. That's an extra 50% to their move characteristic to try and get into threat range.
Also, does anyone else find it ironic that the Coldstar battlesuit is the one that has the flamers?
Oh, yeah.
Shouldn't it
Coldstar
be like
battlesuit. So hot.
Oh, so hot.
Is it hot or cold? I can't tell. As you're burning alive. The other option is Commander Farsight. Movement 10, toughness 5, 2 up save, 4 up invuln, 8 wounds. The weapons loadout is not as impressive. We've got 1 gun, the high-intensity plasma rifle, shooting 24 inches, 2 attacks, hitting on 2, strength 8, AP 3, damage 3.
That's pretty mean.
It is pretty mean, but when you compare it to the 3 additional flamers you can get with the other one, I'm not super impressed because I feel like you're trying to flame some stuff.
Yeah.
But crucially, Commander Farsight is one of the only notable close combat models for the Tau. So we're not going to talk about this too extensively yet, but has this really sweet profile. It can have 4 damage 3 attacks coming in at strength 10 and AP 2, or 8 damage 1 attacks coming in at strength 6 AP 1. So that's pretty sweet. We're going to take a look at that later. But the other thing that's important here is that if you take Farsight, then you have the Way of the Short Blade. While this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes an attack that targets an enemy unit within 9 inches, add 1 to the wound roll.
Okay.
So now you'd have strength 5 flamers that also have +1 to wound.
But you don't have assault.
But you don't have assault.
And you only move 10 inches.
And you only move 10 inches.
So you're doing a lot more work to try and to leverage that.
Yeah. Positioning's going to be a lot more careful with this guy. Also, notably, he gives you stratagems for 1 less per turn. So, as was mentioned in the comment, potentially free Overwatch if you don't want to spend it on something else.
Which is nice because all your flamers are...
Yeah.
Are flamers. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a thing for sure.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and take a look at how these 2 different combinations are going to do into some medium infantry. Let's look at some intercessors.
Okay.
All right. So intercessors, toughness 4 bodies, 3 up saves, 2 wounds apiece. And you're going to see that actually these perform pretty similarly. The commander with the crisis suits does between 8 and 10 killed models. Farsight with the crisis suits does between 7 and 10 killed models.
Interesting. So pretty comparable.
Very comparable. You're going to notice that the with the commander, you do very slightly more damage, but the problem is that the high-intensity plasma rifle doing 3 damage into two wound Marines.
Is a waste.
A little bit of a waste there, yeah.
Sort of similar to the heavy bolters. You can assume that while they're flying by, he's going to shoot at the tank next to them instead of at the intercessors. But for the sake of this simulation, perhaps that's too, yeah.
Well, you also are probably going to want to kill things, so I don't know. Set fire to victory. Yeah, we love you guys.
Yeah.
So I guess to note, the commander's team will have a 99% chance to kill a five-man squad, 40% chance to kill a 10-man squad, whereas Commander Farsight, 98% chance to kill a 5-man squad, 25% chance to kill a 10-man squad.
Okay.
So actually, it looks to me like the regular battlesuits are winning out here a little bit if you're going into medium infantry.
Especially considering that you're doing it with a greater threat range. That seems pretty clear right now. If you're building the squad to kill Marine bodies, commander all the way.
Well, I think crucially, like if you're already wounding on 3s, the +1 to wound is just an extra 25%. Whereas if you're wounding on 5s, +1 to wound is an extra 50%.
Right.
So if you're attacking something with toughness 4 or less, Farsight's ability doesn't really do that much. I mean, it's meaningful, but you're giving up a bunch of flamethrowers to do that.
Once we get to toughness 6 targets, though, he's going to be making a big difference.
Then he's going to be making a bigger difference.
Okay.
So I don't have a toughness 6 target, but I do have a toughness 5 target.
Okay.
Yeah, let's look at some Terminators. So Terminators, of course, are toughness 5, 2-up save, 4-up invuln, and 3 wounds apiece. Again, if they play Armor of Contempt or there's cover, there's definitely going to be a difference here. But the Commander's team kills between 2 and 4 Terminators, and Farsight's team kills between 2 and 4 Terminators.
Okay, so pretty comparable once we hit toughness 5.
Yeah, so now it kind of switched places where the Commander's squad has a 9% chance to wipe the Terminators, and Farsight's squad has a 15% chance to wipe the Terminators.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, part of that is just that the high-intensity plasma rifle is now just going to be flat killing Terminators one-shotting.
That actually suddenly makes that makes his gun relevant in a way that it really wasn't before.
Totally. But again, like these are tiny variations, really. I'm looking at this and I'm like, these are almost the same in terms of damage output.
Again, leading me back to the commander because of his greater range, though.
Yeah, I mean, same. I am always one who picks mobility as the strong suit that I like to exploit as much as possible. Kane is aware.
It's maddening. As a kid, I was orcs and he was blood angels, and I didn't know what positioning meant because basically he could do whatever he wanted all the time. My first 40 games of Warhammer were against an opponent who could just outmaneuver everything, and I never knew what it meant to make a good. I was never rewarded with that went well. You maneuvered well, like because
sometimes. I think I remember having some vague memories of you beating me when we were kids.
I have one memory of beating you once when I had like 20 Gretchen on the bottom floor of a building looking up at your one remaining Space Marine and all of them shooting and barely killing him, and I almost exploded. That's the only thing I remember. Every other time it was just mayhem.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did with his models too. Just clear all these out. We don't need those around.
Yeah. Anyway, moral of the story is Blake is always the speedy guys and is very happy about the new Eldar.
Okay, so I didn't feel like this analysis was complete until we went into something a bit heavier. I figure they're a bunch of flamers. You're not going to be hitting a bunch of heavy vehicles most of the time. So let's look at a medium vehicle, like our good old trusty Gladiator Lancer.
All right, let's hit that medium vehicle.
All right. So now we're up to toughness 10, which crucially is double the strength of these flamers.
Right, because toughness 10 means naturally wounding on 6s, +1 to wound with Farsight means now 5s.
Yeah, 100% boost to the flamers' output there. Although, also important to notice is that because you're going into a vehicle, they don't get that additional AP1. So, because they get an additional AP for the detachment, and then another additional AP if they're not going into a vehicle or monster.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that really makes that.
Right. So all these weapons just got one additional AP. And here's where you can really see the difference, because the commander's team does between 2 and 5 damage, whereas Farsight's team does between 5 and 9 damage. So we're doing basically 4 damage as compared to like 6.7 damage.
Okay.
So more than a 50% increase in the damage from Farsight.
Okay, so against medium marine bodies, obviously Commander. Against heavy marine bodies, kind of questionable, but Commander because he's faster. Honestly, once we get to Gladiator Lancer, I'm thinking this is not the target they were aiming for anyway. So if Farsight's version of the Crisis Squad does better against suboptimal targets, that seems like things are going bad by the time you're leveraging your improvement your selection.
I know there's not a lot of T6 infantry. I kind of wish I had found some now.
I believe Mega Knobs are toughness 6.
So I think into some T6 infantry. Might have to do a follow-up at some point.
T6 infantry might be, that is where you're going to find still having the optimal target because you have the anti-infantry, or rather not vehicle monster.
Yeah, but then, again, that's not an ideal target for your flamers, generally speaking, but Farsight can still make use of it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like after looking at these, I'm leaning on the Commander, and that's what I would advise for Mike, although he's so excited about Farsight.
Well, there is something we haven't considered yet.
What's that? Which
is, although their damage is pretty similar in shooting, Farsight also has a great big short sword.
A huge little sword.
So I figured our analysis wouldn't be complete unless we looked at his close combat. So I decided to just throw Farsight and all those crisis suits fists, which don't do very much, into these targets to see what additional damage they could do. Against the intercessors, another 6.3 damage, so 3 more dead intercessors. Another 4.5 damage against the Terminators, so 1 or potentially 2 Terminators dead. Or another 4.8 damage on that Lancer, which very well could push that over the edge. So, again, that's not a huge amount of damage. And again, notice that the battlesuit fists are doing like
nothing.
It's pretty silly.
They're just wet noodles. They're slapping them.
But again, what I'm seeing here is that if you don't manage to completely wipe the squad, you could just charge in with Farsight. You're already going to be within 9.
And as soon as anyone tries to fight back, or rather disengage, you're going to overwatch them with your mean fucking flamers, your mean darn flamers, and you're going to do it almost definitely within 9 inches to get all your buffs.
Yeah, exactly. So some takeaways here. So at range versus infantry, their outputs are basically the same. Very, very similar output. Farsight squad does have much better damage output against vehicles, but that's also, as we mentioned, not their primary targets.
Right.
So, I mean, if they have to go into vehicles, yeah, better option for Farsight, but it's probably not what they're trying to do most of the time. Yeah. Farsight will get another 4.5 to 6.5 damage through in close combat if you wanted to go that way, if you felt like it was worth making the charge. But it's also worth mentioning that a good part of the damage output of this squad is that they can then overwatch when your opponent decides to move again. So if you're still in combat, you might not get that option. But, there's a lot that goes into play with that. So, I mean, if they can fall back and you still overwatch them, but if they have any, close combat capabilities, you might be hurting yourself if they have very much left. So there's some stuff to weigh up there. The Commander squad has a much better threat range, given that they have plus 2 inches to move and can advance and shoot. So they can move an average of 15.5 inches to try and get within 9 inches of range, as opposed to moving 10 inches and trying to get within 9 inches of range.
That's a big difference right there.
Yeah.
Man, you're a sad panda if you make this big buffed unit and then they can't quite make it in range.
Totally.
You are a sad... And also, like you said with the Demolisher... Are they vehicles? They're vehicles, right?
The battlesuits? Yeah, they're vehicles.
So they could, if they survive your opponent's turn and there's still combat maybe, still get to shoot their flamers even if they were in 3rd round continuing combat.
Oh, you're totally right. They can shoot at infantry that they're in combat with.
Yeah, but if they survive...
also other things can then shoot them, so they wouldn't be protecting themselves by getting into combat.
So
did not consider that before.
Yeah, well, that sounds like something you shouldn't hold out hope for. Then.
Yeah, good catch, though. So as far as I'm concerned, like the regular Commander just gives you so much more threat range, gives you a much larger area of control, which I think is something that's really important. So unless you're looking specifically for a big damage dealing threat right in the midboard, I would probably go Commander over Farsight in this case.
Yeah, but Farsight is so much cooler.
He is, and I can see some situations in which it might be advantageous, but I feel like the majority of the time you want to go with a regular commander.
I'm pretty sure Mike is still going to get Commander Farsight. I don't think you're going to deter him. And I think that's fine. I think rule of cool should be the end of it.
Absolutely.
This is just for fun.
This is just for fun.
Fun mathiness.
Well, War Fiends, it's been so much fun. I love all your comments. I love being able to answer these questions. And we're going to go paint some minis. So until next time, do things that Warhammer people do. Yeah.
Thank you for watching another episode of Warhammer Math.
For the Emperor!
We're going to find out which you should be.